So like I said, counterpoint is just the wonderful, wonderful art and skill of writing melodies that can be layered on top of each other. And so as we work on this, the first thing we should probably do is learn how to write an actual melody. So let's get out of this. Let's start with the chord progression. 9 times out of 10, I always start with a chord progression first. That's just personally how I write melodies. So here we've got a nice little chord progression. Took me like, what, a minute? Super simple. There's a lot more complicated stuff, a lot more fun stuff we could do, but it works. So we've got our chord progression, we've got our bass line. Now let's talk about writing melodies, shall we? So there are 3 super common structures that you can use to write melodies. These are not cheat codes, they are not cookie cutters, it's more like grammar. All right, when you speak English or whatever language you happen to be most comfortable with, there is a correct order that words can go in. And if you mix it around, if you start talking like Yoda, you can still be understood, but people recognize that it feels off. So 3 very common structures, grammatical structures for music, are sentence structure. We have period structure. And we have sequencing structure. You don't have to use any of these, but these 3 structures make up the vast majority of all melodic structures. Even if you don't know what these are, chances are if you write a melody by ear and just like playing on the piano and figuring out something that sounds right to you, you're going to end up writing in one of these 3 structures. Not because there are any kind of law or rule behind them, but because the vast majority of music that we listen to fits within these 3 structures. Most of the pop music, most of the concert music, most of the film music, most melodies in general will fit into one of these 3 structures. And so if your entire life you've been listening to Western music and you're used to this kind of structure, then the way you start writing music is just going to naturally fall into these structures. The same way that we learn how to speak by just hearing the people around us speak the language of our mother tongue, right? So let's talk about each of these structures in particular. Sentence structure is the idea of you have a motif. Very simple, just 2-bar idea. You repeat your 2-bar idea with a little bit of difference, all right? Something new. Something to just keep it a little, not always, you can do just the same exact idea repeated, but usually there's a little kind of change, if only to just follow the chords. Then you have a brand new idea before ending with your cadence. And we'll do a demonstration of this soon. Period structure, super similar. You have a 2-bar idea, a motif. You introduce a new 2-bar idea, a new motif. You repeat the original motif, and then you end with a cadence. And a cadence doesn't need to be fancy, it just means you find a way to end it, all right? Sequencing structure, you have an idea. You move that idea up or down. You move that idea up or down again, typically in the same direction. And then you have a cadence. You keep continuing the up, 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 up kind of idea or the down, 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 down idea until you find a way to end it. So let's write a melody in sentence structure. Shall we? No worries. Welcome to Mashi. Welcome, everybody. So sentence structure is this motif, repeat the motif with sometimes a little bit of variation, new motif, and cadence idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these chord tones underneath. And this is just a quick academic way to write a melody. I'm going to pick 2 of them. Let's say E and G. You can put as much thought or as little thought into this as you'd like. Since I'm trying to do a lesson live, I'm going to put in just a little bit of thought. My second bar, same thing. 2 notes from my chord, this time F and A. So this is my first 2-bar idea. Remember that in sentence structure, we want to repeat our 2-bar idea, the same basic idea. So over A minor, I'm going to do E and A. I'm going to move up 2 chordal tones, and then I'm going to come back down and move up again. So let's do F and A. So you can see how these have the same basic shape. Move up, then down, then up. Move up, then down, then up. So now we've got our 2-bar idea 1. We've repeated our 2-bar idea with a little bit of variation. So now for sentence structure says, let's create a new idea, idea B. So I'm going to say, let's start with another chordal tone. Let's move up. We'll go to C, then we'll move down to G. We'll come up to A and down to F. So we just kind of did the inverse. Down, up, down, instead of up, down, up. We've got our 2-bar idea, another 2-bar idea, a new idea, and then we have our last 2 bars, which needs to be a cadence idea, which again, the cadence does not need to be complicated. A cadence is just a way to end it. Typically, most times, a strong cadence, a strong way to end your melody is to move down in direction. So we are going to end up probably around C. Nice strong finish on C. And then we just need to find a way to connect this F to this C. So let's go G, D, C. So now we have the shape of a melody. It's not a good melody by any means, but it's the shape of a melody. In fact, I'm going to play this one instead of just playing it. Let's go down here. Turn the metronome on, and let's hit play. All right, super basic idea. We've got a shape. So now the next step, once we've got a basic shape, is to introduce rhythm to the mix. Shall we? So we're going to go off a 2-bar idea again, because we're following sentence structure. I'm going to come down to 8th notes. I'm going to do 8th note, dotted quarter note. 2 8th notes, quarter note. 2 quarter notes, half note. All right, this was all random. All right, I didn't have any means or method behind this. All I'm trying to do is create some kind of motif. Right? So this is our 2-bar idea. And remember, in sentence structure, you have your 2-bar idea, and then you repeat your 2-bar idea with a little bit of variation. Since we've already got variation in the harmony, I could add variation to the rhythm, but I'm not. I'm trying to keep this simple. All right, so we've got our main idea. We've repeated our main idea with a little bit of variation. Now we are going to create a new idea. All right, super simple. And then let's just do our cadence. We're just going to find a way to move it down. So now we've added rhythm to the mix. And now let's listen to this little idea. I'll play it on the piano again. I'm trying to get better at playing piano. Super simple, super goofy, cheesy little melody. And we've got one last step to make this right. All right, to make it a passable melody. All right, so we started with our chord progression. We started by adding chordal tones, notes from the underlying chord progression, and trying to make the general shape for melody. Now we've added rhythm. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of bridge the gaps. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to take some of these shorter note values and just add a little bit of movement. Move a little upward movement. Scratching my ear because it's itchy. We're going to repeat the movement here. Since it's a larger gap, we'll add a little bit of variation to stepwise movement. We'll jump up here and down. Oh, that's a little crunchy. That's a tritone. Well, we'll see how it works. And then let's just bridge the gap down here. All right, now we've got a nice little melody. Super simple, super cheesy, not the best melody I've ever written, but it functions, right? And so I use these methods in two kind of common situations. All right, situation number one is this. All right, I'm live streaming. I'm doing a live stream, I'm teaching a lesson, I'm doing something that requires a speedy melody. All right, situation number two is I'm just stuck. All right, I've been working on a project. I can't figure out a theme for the life of me. So what I'll do is I'll do something like this. I'll start out with a chord progression or two or three. And then I will write academically a melody that I know works, again, on an academic level. I know that it functions, that this is technically a well-written melody. Might not be the catchiest, might not be the prettiest, not be the most original, but it's technically well-written. It follows a good structure. And so I'll do that. I'll come up with 5, 10 melodies that I just know work on an intellectual level. And then I'll walk away. I'll say, all right, I need a break. I'm not feeling good. Don't have my mojo or anything today. I'm going to work on a different song. I'm going to work on practicing something else. I'm going to read. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do something else. And then tomorrow, I'm going to come back and listen to these 5 or 10 melodies I just wrote. Then typically, if I have 5 or 10 melodies that I've written, that they all function on an academic level, they all function on a technical level, chances are I'm going to have one of them that I like. It might not be perfect, but it's going to inspire something. And this technique has never failed me to date. I have never had a project where I wrote 5 or 10 melodies, had them choose, came back the next day, and was like, man, none of these work. None of them could possibly fit the character or whatever. There's always at least one. And even if that's not the one that I go with, it at least inspires me. I'm like, oh, hold up. I don't like the melody, but these 2 bars here were kind of nice. So I'm going to cut and paste these or whatever. I'm going to say, like, all right, I'm going to start over here. I'm going to use these as my new motif. I'm going to try and write a melody. I'm going to explore. I'm going to come up with something. But yeah, so those are the 2 situations where I'll write a melody really quickly like this. Oh, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. We're getting some people, seeing people on the stream. Good. So this was sentence structure. And like I said, you've also got period structure, which is very similar. You would start with your 2-bar idea, come up with a new 2-bar idea, repeat the original, and then cadence. Sequencing, you have an idea and you move it up or down, you move it up or down again, and you keep continuing that until you're done and come up with a cadence. If you guys want demonstrations of those, we can do those down the line, but for now, we've got a basic melody that we've written. Let's learn about counterpoint, right? So let's say I have this melody, and I like it, it's good, it's decent, it functions, but I need another theme. Maybe it's a theme for my villain, or maybe it's a theme for the rivals turned lovers, or whatever kind of gimmick you're going with the characters. You've got 2 themes, and for whatever reason, you want to make sure these 2 themes can layer on top of each other. Because at some point, you know you're going to play both of them at the same time. What you're going to do is you are going to start, hopefully with a chord progression, because that makes everything easier, but it doesn't have to have a chord progression. But we are going to use that same exact method that we just used. We're going to start with 2 chordal tones, because there is only one real rule to counterpoint. There are tons of rules. If you were trying to prove yourself and do it academically, there's a lot of rules. Out of all of the dozens and dozens and dozens of rules, there's only one that really matters if your goal is to just write a melody that can layer with another melody. And that one all-important rule is this. All right, the one rule to rule them all. I gotta laugh at my own jokes, right? All right, anytime that you have 2 or more notes being articulated at the same time, they must form a consonant interval. And there are exceptions. There are moments where you kind of have notes that aren't forming consonant intervals. It depends on the genre. It depends on the style and the sound. There are a lot of rules that go into what make intervals sound dissonant within a melody setting and stuff. But for the most part, this is how you get started. All right? Anytime you have 2 or more notes being articulated, I'm going to highlight that one as well. At the same time, they must form a consonant interval. If you understand this one rule, you will never have any difficulty writing contrapuntal melodies. Now, what do I mean by being articulated? Being articulated means that you have notes starting at the same exact beat or the same exact subdivision of the beat. So, for example, if I were to put a C major here, or a C natural, this C natural is being played at the same time as this E and this E. But the only one that it is being articulated at the same time is here with the E, because if we zoom in, they start at the exact same point. That is what I mean by articulated at the same time. Anytime two notes start at the exact same time, they need to make sure that they work well. So, for example, if I were to do a little idea like that, and I were to start on an F and a B, super dissonant. But if I just stagger those entrances, those last two were articulated at the same time, so they're super consonant, but suddenly it's not as crunchy. I staggered the B and the F because still crunchy, but not nearly as bad as, right? I played that so many times that it started to sound passable towards the end. And that's a major rule in music. Repetition breeds familiarity. All right, if you keep repeating it, people become more familiar with it, and they tend to be more open to it. So that's why it's also important to take breaks from composing as well. If you listen to your own ideas over and over and over and over again, they start to sound good. And then that might be why you notice when you listen to a piece you wrote like a month ago, you're like, was I really proud of that? I feel that way a lot about my music, at least sometimes. And that's because you took some time off of it, and now suddenly all the glaring little unhappy sounds are much more noticeable. So, if you want to make sure that you follow this rule, that anytime you have two or more notes being articulated at the same time, they must form a consonant interval. It's super simple. And this is why I said it's nice to form a chord progression. The consonant intervals are a perfect fifth. In fact, I'm going to write this down. Consonant intervals equals a minor third, a major third. I'm going to put in parentheses a perfect fourth, because it really depends on who you ask. A perfect fifth, a minor six, a major six, and an octave. All right? These are the consonant intervals. Dissonant intervals are the minor second, major second, again, depending on who you ask, perfect fourth. We have the tritone. We have the minor seven and the major seven. So, for example, two notes a third, minor third apart. This is consonant, or that's major third. So that works. Got a major third. You have a perfect fourth, again, depending on who you ask, and the setting that it's used in. A perfect fifth. A minor sixth. That's a major sixth. That's the minor sixth. Major sixth. Octave. Those are all dissonant, or consonant. If we want to listen to the dissonant intervals, we have a minor two. We have a major two. Depending on who you ask, we have the perfect fourth. We have the tritone. We have the minor seventh. We have the major seventh. And those are the dissonant intervals. Now, the cool things about the minor thirds and the minor third, major third, and minor sixth, major sixth is they're basically the same notes, just inverted. So if I were to do, for example, C to E, that's a major three. But if I take this E, drop it an octave, and form E to C, that's a minor sixth. All right, so that's a bunch of interval theory. You can explore it a little bit more if you want. I have a video on counterpoint that might be helpful. But if you are unfamiliar with any of that, the simple way to remember this is if it's a chordal tone, it should work, especially if it's from a triad, like a major minor triad. So E, to form, I'm going to follow the same steps to form my contrapuntal melody that I used to write this one. I'm going to go one measure at a time. I'm going to sketch out a basic shape of a melody using chordal tones. So we have E. Let's just go with C. And then we will do... Ooh, no, this one's tricky because notice how on this beat I have an F. An F is not a chordal tone. But you know what chord it does form with? F and C both belong in F major. So I'm going to use C. E and F, that's dissonant. That's a minor second. F and G, that's a major second. But F and C, that's a perfect fourth. So again, depending on who you ask, that could be dissonant. If you were to do it the other way, it's a perfect fifth. It's much more consonant. But for now, I'm just going to use the perfect fourth because it's a potential consonant. So then E and E, let's just do G. Let's start with G down here, or we could just stick with C. That's what we'll do. We'll stick with C for now. We can always change it later. So next, we have F. We need to pick a chordal tone from here, and it could be anything because you can see F belongs to the chord. So we'll do D, and then A. Let's do D again, shall we? Super simple idea. Now we're going to repeat that. This time, let's do a period structure. All right, so period structure says we start with an idea. Now we need to come up with a new idea. So we've got E down here. Let's start with C again. But now we've got, no, let's not do C again because we got to form that in a consonant interval. Let's go down to A. I'm just going to drop these down in octave so we can see the melody a bit better. So we go A, C. We got to form a dissonant, consonant interval with F, so we'll go D. And then we'll go F. So we've got C, we've got our main idea, our first idea. We've got a new idea. And so now I'm going to repeat my main idea again with a little bit of variation if we want. So we'll do E, E. Yep, E and B form a consonant interval with each other. So it's a common idea, a common note. Then we'll do common note. So it's a different idea, different shape. We move down and up, but we've got a same basic idea. Two repeated ideas, two repeated notes. So again, you can have variation when you repeat your motif. Now we just need to form some kind of cadence. So we'll go D, we'll go G, and then we'll do, let's just do G again. So we've got a basic shape for our melodies. And I'm sure that there are so many rules I'm breaking from counterpoint. For example, the use of parallel movement, similar movement, and all that kind of stuff. But again, I'm not worried about all those other rules because my main goal is just to create two melodies that can stand out on their own and be layered on each other later in my soundtrack. But let's hear this. All right, so we've got our main melody on top, super cheesy, super simple melody. I have now written out a basic shape for a melody underneath, making sure to follow that rule that anytime two notes are articulated at the same time, the moment that they start at precisely the same time, they form a consonant interval. And the simplest way, like I said, to find out if they form a consonant interval is just to ask yourself, do these two notes belong to a chord with a major or minor triad together? So C and E, yep, they can belong to C major or A minor. F and C, yep, F major or F minor. D and F, yep, D minor, those work. D and A, these form a perfect fifth. A and E, yep, C and F, perfect fourth. So again, who you're asking, some people think perfect fourth sounds dissonant. Some people think it's fine consonant. I operate under the assumption that if it sounds good, I don't care. D, F, there we go. F and A, they're good. E and C, fine. E and B, that's fine. A and C, they're fine. G and C, good. D and G, yep. D and G again, and G and C. We're good. So let's see if there are any moments where I have notes that form a consonant, a dissonant interval. So, no, nothing really. Nothing sticks out to me as being super dangerous, which is a bummer because I was hoping to give an example about how it doesn't matter as long as they're not articulated at the same time. But we're going to play this, and you're going to notice how, because I just followed that one rule, that anytime two notes are articulated at the same time, they must form a consonant interval. These two lines are going to work perfectly well together. We'll leave the chords and the bass line muted. So good. So now we're going to do step number 2 that we did to write the first melody. Remember, we have a shape for our second melody. Now we're going to add rhythm to that shape. Now, I should mention that anyone who wants to learn more about counterpoint and much more like learn more about the rules, just Google counterpoint tabletop composer. You're going to find my blog post about it, and you're going to find my YouTube video that goes more in depth about the rhythms and a couple other rules that you can use to make really good counterpoint. But for the most part, this one rule is all you need. But if you want to go a bit more in depth. So let's see, let's do quarter notes. Let's have a contrasting rhythmic idea. All right, and again, as I add my rhythm, I'm going to make sure anytime I add a new start to the note, it must form a constant interval if it starts at the same time as everybody. So this is how I started. We're good. We're good. That's fine. Now let's add a little bit of movement. We're fine. All right, so this is my rhythmic idea. We're good. These form at the same time. These play at the same time. We're all good there. No dissonant intervals yet. So since we're doing period structure, I know that my first 2 measures are going to have a similar idea to my 5th and 6th. So let's just automatically swap this. Let's do the same rhythm. And we'll do is like 2 quarter notes. There we go. So now we're going to go through here. E and C, we're good. E and B, we're good. E and G, we're good. A and C, we're fine. G and C, F and C, we're good so far. No issues. So now let's add a new rhythmic idea. We'll just do that kind of idea. So we've got a nice little idea here, just some random rhythms. Again, following those guidelines that I established earlier in the lesson. E and A, that's fine. F and C, fine. A and C, fine. F and D, we're good. A and F, fine. All good. And then we already did these down here. So we're all fine. There we go. Double check. We're good. So then we'll just we'll leave it like that. So now let's listen to our new rhythmic idea. Awesome. They're working well together. So now remember, writing melodies, that super quick academic approach that we took. Start with the chordal tones first to create a basic shape. And remember, use either sentence structure, period structure, or sequencing structure to create that shape. All right. Then add rhythm to your shape. All right. Again, following sentence structure, period structure, or sequencing structure. And then the third step for writing a nice melody is, again, to add a bit more variety. Take your rhythm and change some of the shorter notes, move them around in pitch, add a little bit of movement, make it an actual melody. Now, all of this is a nice, perfectly neat, well-structured approach to writing. All right, this is an academic approach to writing. Like I said, those 2 times that I use these very strict kind of structured approaches is one, when time is of the essence, when I'm teaching a lesson or when I'm going live or I need to come up with something really quickly. And 2, when I'm stuck. I just have no idea what I'm doing. I have a deadline coming up and I've got no idea what the melody for my character needs to be. And so I just need to crank out a bunch of options. And so I'll crank out like 5 melodies or 10 melodies. I'll come up with some crazy number of melodies. I'll take the day off. I'll come back tomorrow. I'll listen to each of them. And chances are, it has never failed me once, at least one of them is going to be nice. And even if I don't like the one perfectly, I can adjust it or it can inspire a new idea. Whatever, it always helps get the ball running. All of this to say, if you prefer to just sit at a keyboard and come up with a melody, that is perfectly valid. I do that. I have the soundtrack I'm writing right now. All right. So for my latest video, I shared a sketch of a Kyrie that I'm writing for the soundtrack. That was a very meticulous melody. All right. I took the time to write that down and figure it out. I have 10 pages of notes that I took preparing to write that one. The second piece that I haven't shared yet, I cranked that out in a day. All right, I sat down, I had an idea, I wrote it down, it was good, I was fine. I was like, awesome, great. I don't need 10 pages of notes. I don't need a bunch of academic approach to get my mind going. I felt inspired, I had a melody, it worked, I sent it to the writer, and he's like, oh, I love it, it fits, perfect. And then I just orchestrated it. So it changes. Every day, sometimes I use a highly structured approach, sometimes I use a much more inspiration-based approach. Every day is different, right? But right now, we're going to add a little bit of movement. All right, let's go. So we're going to do A and B. Now notice, No, yeah, this doesn't form any kind of dissonant intervals after all. But I was gonna say, even if, say, for example, I jumped up here, this is still gonna work. Even though E and D form a dissonant interval, they're not being articulated at the same time. So if we listen to this first measure, you didn't hear any crazy, right? That didn't sound terrible. It worked because they weren't articulated at the same time. This one started over here. This one started over here. So you're good. It's not going to cause any issues. In fact, let's leave it that way, shall we? So let's move this one up here. A little bit of movement. They still form a consonant interval, so that's fine. Let's listen to that. I think that's fine. So I've got my idea. Now I've got a new idea. And we're checking consonant, consonant, don't care because they're not played at the same time. Consonant, don't care, they're not being played at the same time. So we've got our main idea. So then we've got our original idea. It's kind of chaotic at the moment, but let's move down. Then we'll move down. Consonant, consonant, consonant. Don't care because they're not played at the same time. And then we've got that basic shape that we were working with. Large leaps. Little variation. I'll just add a little bum at the end. And so now, here's the important part. We've followed the rules. Everything forms a consonant interval. Maybe it's not the prettiest melody we've ever written, but let's drop these down an octave, shall we? Let's raise that, get it out of our way. Let's drop these down so it's not so high-pitched. And what we're going to do is we're going to mute this top melody. We're going to listen to our lower melody and make sure that it sounds like a decent melody. If it doesn't, we'll make some changes to it. We'll make sure it works until it sounds good on its own, and then we can just go back and proofread. Let's drag these over a bit. I'd like a little more syncopation. Let's drag this over a bit. It works. It's fine. It's not the most beautiful melody I've ever written, but we're going to watch something very cool here. We are going to we're going to copy and paste this whole thing. We're going to paste it twice. We're going to expand this. We're going to watch how each melody can be played on its own, and then they can come in at the same time and be layered. So let's see. Then we will mute these next two. Then we're going to unmute the top melody. That's not supposed to be unmuted. And then we're going to play them at the same time. Shall we? See how all of this sounds. there we go. I might add, yeah, I'm fine. It works, right? It all works. If you wanted to keep going and add layer after layer after layer, it does get more complicated with each layer, but you just need to follow the same rule. Anytime two notes are articulated at the same time, they must all form consonant intervals with each other. If you wanted 3, 4, 5 different layers, my recommendation would be start with a very active melody, super simple, sustained, barely a melody. Next layer down, you can be active, super melodic again. The layer in between, super simple, not the most melodic, basic idea. So basically sandwich it. Complex, simple, complex, simple. That's a real quick way to just keep it nice. And then if we wanted to, we could, like I said, we could unmute the bass line underneath as well. That would be fine as well. So let's summarize everything, shall we? Let's summarize everything we just learned. And then after the summary, we'll do the Q&A. Any questions you guys got, I'll be happy to address them. So, writing melodies. Here's the process I taught you. Start with chord progressions. Right? Next, pick 2 chordal tones. 2 chordal tones per measure, and build the basic shape following one of the basic melodic structures. And these were, let's zoom out a little bit. These were sentence structure, period structure, and sequencing structure. Next, step 3, add rhythm to your shape. Again, following your structure. Step 4, make adjustments and add non-chordal tones to your rhythm to make it more interesting. All right, then counterpoint. Counterpoint. You're going to follow the same exact process, but keeping in mind a single golden rule. All right? I like the joke. One rule to rule them all. I like my own humor. All right? That's corny, but I enjoy it. So the one rule to rule them all is going to be anytime 2 or more notes are articulated at the same time, they must form a consonant interval. All right, so follow the same process anytime they form 2. And super simple way to remember that: if 2 notes belong to a major or minor triad together, they form a consonant interval. All right, that's a simple, pretty simple kind of rule to follow, a little guideline. Again, there are exceptions. You can have 2 notes that don't form a consonant interval. I do it a lot in my Requiem that I'm writing at the moment. That's fine. If you like the sound, it's good. The golden rule, in fact, I'd actually say the real rule to rule them all, is the golden rule is basically, if you like it, if it sounds good, it's fine. Who cares what the music theory says? Who cares what a music theory professor would say? If it sounds good, you're fine. That is a summary of what we just learned. All right, so we've got lots of questions.